Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Run Your Data Centers from Anywhere. This event is brought to you in partnership with Nutanix and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. Now, on this event, we want to help you solve all of your data center and hybrid cloud challenges. We want to help answer your questions, so we encourage you to use the questions box there in your audience console. It's just to the left of the slides window, and in fact, I'll highlight it to draw your attention to it. Of course, we appreciate all the good morning messages from everyone around the world, but we also appreciate your topical comments throughout the webinar and questions. So we'll be answering those during the webinar as best we can and queuing up the best questions for a dedicated Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We also have a special link there in the handouts tab I want to call your attention to. That is the Nutanix Hyperconverged Infrastructure Test Drive. So make sure you click on that link. That'll open up a new tab in your browser or a new browser window. And that's where you can fill out a simple form to get access to the Nutanix Test Drive. You'll want to check that out after today's special webinar. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media. I'll be the moderator for today's event. And you might have heard that we're giving out a Tango gift card on the event today. Tango gift cards can be redeemed for e-gift cards at your choice of hundreds of retailers, including Best Buy, Walmart, restaurants, places like that. And we'll be announcing the winner on the live presentation at the end of the Q&A. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found in the handouts tab. And without further delay, I'm excited to introduce today's expert presenters. They are Mr. Mark Trouard-Roel. Mark has spent over 25 years in IT infrastructure roles from support to system architecture and consultancy. He now leads product marketing for Nutanix Essential Technology products that empower customers to simplify infrastructure planning, onboarding, and management. Mark, thank you for being on the event today.
Thank you, David.
And we'll also be hearing from Mr. Steve Carter. Steve has been with Nutanix for almost 9 years, where he's worked in multiple functions, including engineering, sales engineering, and now marketing, where Steve manages product marketing for Nutanix flagship product, AOS. Steve, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, David. Glad to be here.
And finally, I'm also excited to hear from Mr. Nikhil Bhatia. He's been at Nutanix for 4.5 years, and he works in R&D in the core infrastructure area. He currently leads the Lifecycle Manager, or LCM team, which works on all one-click upgrades at Nutanix. Nikhil, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Welcome, to the webinar, and glad to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, I know Nikhil and Steve both have some really cool live demos lined up for us today, so we're excited to see those. And with that, I'll hand it over to our first presenter. Take it away.
Thank you, David. And welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be here talking about running your data centers from your anywhere. My name is Mark Trouard-Roel, and I'm going to cover some of the portions of this session. Where I want to start with, however, is a look back at what our Nutanix mission statement is about, our founding vision, if you will, which was really to make management of IT infrastructure so simple that essentially it becomes invisible. And this is really something that many of the big public clouds sort of started. They're able to create scale with a very low number of IT administrators. And so this is something that Nutanix brought to the enterprise. It was a vision that we wanted to be able to combine the compute, storage, networking, and virtualization, all components that organizations are using, into this one invisible stack, allowing businesses to really scale their business without the having to scale all the IT infrastructure alongside it. Now, it's all very well wanting to make infrastructure invisible. But what we do know is that infrastructure is also complex. What we have here is a typical 3-tier architecture, and we see that there are silos of infrastructure of different types of storage controllers. And what this results in is often long planning cycles for the planning and deployments. we'll have mixtures of different types of vendors in there, from storage through the networking architectures, the server, the compute, and the virtualization architectures. And often what it will result in is these purpose-built systems, silos of infrastructure that are serving just one sort of application need. They all require very sort of careful integration as well, not just the initial deployment integration, but ongoing maintenance of that infrastructure. If you're looking to upgrade a piece of the storage, how does that affect the entire stack? And this ultimately, again, results in specialized skills being required. Now, what we find is that organizations typically spend most of their effort on the infrastructure layer and less on the application layer and management of the applications to our customers. Really, this should be the other way around. And so what we're talking about today is the Nutanix solution and how we achieve that, but through very much the prism of remote IT. So how can you run your data centers from your anywhere? These are the areas that we're focusing on. The deployment of new IT environments into remote locations, whether it's a sort of single node or many nodes, whether it's relatively local, it might be just a local data center, whether it's to sort of store IT or remote office, branch office environments. How do we do the typical day-to-day management of the infrastructure, and what technologies does Nutanix bring into this to really minimize the amount of effort required by IT administrators to keep that going? And then how do you support this environment? What support automation capabilities are there for issue remediation and the likes? Ultimately, there's always upgrades. We're very familiar with the Upgrade Tuesday nomenclature that is used. Many organizations have a day of the week when they typically like to do those upgrades. We've taken a new approach with Nutanix technologies that will show you how you can do your upgrades at any time from anywhere. In terms of the path to a journey to the cloud, we see typically most organizations start on the left-hand side of the screen with infrastructure modernization. It's really about achieving operational and economical efficiencies. How we're improving on server virtualization, sort of VDI use cases and robo use cases, but achieving efficiencies at the infrastructure layer that allows us to scale the business more easily without requiring large numbers of people to cope for that scale. As we move more into the as a service for automation piece, it's really about bringing further simplicities and automation that again allow the business to scale in a way that wasn't possible with traditional three-tier architectures. But ultimately, organizations are heading to this sort of cloud use case where it's a mixture of hybrid and multi-clouds. Clouds on-prem in your own data centers, use of public clouds where necessary, sort of maybe burst into the public cloud use case scenario. So I'm going to hand over to Steve at this point to go through a Nutanix technology overview. Steve?
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the foundation of Nutanix that makes this remote management possible. So let's get into it. So on the left here you see traditional infrastructure that most companies these days are running in their data centers with storage, in a separate tier from the compute, and then of course virtualization on top with all the apps up above. With a pretty sophisticated distributed system, which I'll get into a tiny bit, but we're not going to go too into depth. We're able to converge that all down into a set of scalable building blocks, essentially, such that they can be scaled out in small increments, and they essentially self-manage themselves. And this is what really enables this simplified management that means you can focus a lot more on the applications themselves. And even you can focus less on the virtualization and all of the administration of the virtualization layer as well, to really simplify things further. So, and all it really takes is a top of rack switch. So we get rid of the storage networking as well. this is an example of one of the areas where, you can let the infrastructure manage itself and avoid having to, respond to fire drills and things like that in the middle of the night, or, especially these days when it's a bit tougher to get down to the data center. So for example, what we have here is a 5-node cluster. We've got a single VM just for the simplicity of the diagram. And you can see that this VM is written 3 blocks of data, right? So what we've done, the system replicates those blocks across the cluster. So since there's three blocks, they're spread across 3 other nodes. So let's say we have a node failure, right? The node goes down, VM is brought back up on another node in the cluster, just as it would, as you're used to. And at this point, it's up and running. It's able to access its data. Some of the data is local, some is remote. And immediately, automatic rebuild kicks in. And what's important to note here is that the rebuild is actually fully distributed. So it's not pulling like a mirrored copy of the entire disk from one of the other nodes. It's all the nodes in the cluster are participating. So your workloads are not impacted by this rebuild operation. The only thing that was impacted were the VMs on the node that went down in the first place. So now we're back up to a fully redundant state, and a node goes down again, right? Same thing happens, migrates to a new node, and the rebuild occurs again. And this can continue happening as long as you have, at least 3 nodes in the cluster. Of course, if the whole cluster goes down one node at a time, eventually you'll be out of resources. But the idea here is that it self-heals, and that's what enables this simplified management. Facing is, business isn't stopping, and so what we have here is a 3-node cluster, and we're going to go ahead and add some storage, right? Let's say we're running out of storage faster than compute, so you can add a node that has more storage on the node itself. And this is seamlessly added to the cluster. The data is automatically rebalanced in the background. So you don't have to create new VMs to get access to this new storage. It's as if it was always part of the cluster. Now let's say that we're using up storage, still even faster than compute, to the point where we don't even need more compute. So you can actually add storage-only nodes as well. And these are great because you actually don't even have to license them for virtualization if you're running a non-Nutanix hypervisor. So it's a way to basically just add storage shells essentially to your cluster, but it's still managed in the same intelligent fabric as the rest of the cluster. Now maybe we have some really high performance workloads. You can also then add all flash nodes to the cluster, and these they're not slowed down by the hybrid nodes, which of course, all flash is consistently higher performance, but the way Nutanix tiers data, it keeps the hot data on flash as a true tier as opposed to just cache. And this new node actually keeps all of its replicas on flash on the other nodes as well, so that you end up with, or at least it's active data on flash on the other nodes as well. So you end up with really high performing node within the cluster that you've been running with. All right, back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Steve. So that's the high-level overview of some of the Nutanix technology. But how do we go about deploying and provisioning this, particularly doing so remotely? We have a technology called Nutanix Foundation Central. And really, it's trying to address a number of challenges that we see for organizations looking to deploy infrastructure. One is about scalability. How do organizations, large-scale remote office, branch office implementations, for example, this could be store IT for retailers that have a small IT implementation in many stores around the globe. It could also just be a large organization that has multiple data centers distributed across the globe. How are they able to remotely deploy infrastructure without requiring those resources on the ground? Can we get that central management plane to coordinate everything across all of the different sites and regions without requiring lots of different tools to do so? What about cost? Because if we do need to send people to remote sites, be it robo offices or stores to implement technology, it adds costs. If you need those specialist resources, it adds cost as well. So really, we're trying to address here how we can manage those deployments, but centrally in a very easy fashion without requiring lots of travel to remote sites and expensive resources to do so. And also, how do we manage this from a software version? Let's just say that technology is shipped out from a factory with a particular version on, but we wanted something different on that. How do we rebuild that from the bare metal up, essentially? How do we manage the history tracking of different versions of technology that are deployed? And what about, this is very specific to Nutanix, but from a foundation perspective, which is a component of Foundation Central, that previously required people to have that technology on the laptop. So we wanted to eliminate that and have a central application so that you didn't require local technology. So Foundation Central is this technology. It's simple and fast to do deployments across your infrastructure. The install is done very, very quickly in less than an hour, and it is a single installer for all of your deployments, regardless of that configuration type that you're looking to lay down on the bare metal. We can image multiple clusters, so anything from a single host in a single region to multiple sites. We're deploying both the AOS technology that Steve was just talking about, but also the hypervisor. And that's your hypervisor of choice, be it our AHV hypervisor or something like VMware HCI or Microsoft Hyper-V as well. Taking that a step further, we can use Foundation Central for global automated node deployments. So this is really where we're then able to, from a single central control plane, streamline the deployment globally for our node deployments, whether it's creating new clusters, whether we're taking existing nodes that may be built in a particular version and wanting to re-image those in the same or another cluster. That you don't require the local site expertise for this, because it's all run centrally and it's run in a way that doesn't require those very specialized resources on the ground. Of course, we also get the centralized deployment history tracking as well, so that it's very easy from one central control plane to understand what's been deployed, where and when, and by whom. So I'm going to hand back to Steve at this point to talk a little bit more about AOS and Prism.
All right, thank you, Mark. So yeah, part of managing remotely, of course, has to do with how do you actually manage your environment as far as VMs, hardware, so on and so forth. So Nutanix makes this really easy. In the traditional infrastructure world, there's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle, and each of those pieces has its own management interface. Often this requires pretty deep expertise to really understand each of these in order to use it appropriately and not get yourself into trouble. And so, what this often means is that you have specialization across the organization, where some people focus on storage, some focus on servers, and so on and so forth. And that can slow things down. It can make, especially complex projects challenging. So what Nutanix does is combines this all down into a single unified interface that everybody can get their job done, without having to go through a bunch of different layers to execute a single task. So we call this Prism. And this allows you to manage not only a single cluster or a set of clusters, but you can actually manage your global environment from this single interface. I'm going to show you a quick demo in a moment. And then one of the other things is the inbuilt intelligence into Prism, which we call Prism Pro. And essentially, it uses machine learning and some pretty sophisticated algorithms to perform a lot of, to give you a lot of insight in your environment. So what I'm showing here is an example of, a capacity runway, like when the cluster, there's also automated resource optimization. So for example, if you're going to run out in 28 days and it's storage, it'll tell you, you can delete a bunch, or, there maybe is a bunch of snapshots. You could, get a bunch of your capacity back that way. And so there's, inbuilt remediation, as well as just informing you that, that something is going to happen in the future. And And there's a lot more to it than that, but just to give you a kind of an intro.
What I'll jump to is talking about monitoring and troubleshooting remotely. And that's with a technology we call Nutanix Insights. Now you're in for a little bit of a treat, because Insights has been a technology that we, within our support team, has been using for helping our customers for a number of years. What's new about it, however, is that we're opening this up to customers to be able to use. We're adding a whole new front-end experience with it to help customers more effectively monitor and troubleshoot their environments and automate a part of that experience. Now, why are we doing this? Well, Nutanix is, to put it bluntly, customer obsessed. This is a quote from Gartner that the name Nutanix carries an image of functionality and quality. We have a large number of customers globally, and a very high customer satisfaction and net promoter score. In fact, if you're not familiar with the net promoter score, that is a range that goes from -100 to +100, where organizations are asked about their vendors' support experience, and does the support experience attract or detract from that company. And for organizations in the sort of the Silicon Valley area, software organizations typically have around a +30 net promoter score, which is still on the right side of zero. It's still a positive, but it's very rare to see an organization with +90, let alone +90 average for the last 6 years. So we've really been very attentive to how our customers engage with our support team to make sure that we get a very high customer satisfaction experience. Now, that being said, when customers engage with support, it's still a reactionary process. A customer has an issue in their environment, they engage our customer support as a result. What we've looked at is how we can go further and really produce something that is much more proactive and predictive in its nature. And we've come up with the predictive health and support automation capabilities of Insights, which is really around identifying discoveries within customers' environments that enable us to uncover those gaps in the health of their infrastructure, their cloud, and make recommendations to help improve availability and performance of their infrastructures. This is done through one single pane of glass. Essentially, regardless of where your infrastructure is, whether it's local to you, whether it's remote, whether you have a distributed infrastructure across multiple sites and geographies, you have this one single health-focused view of your infrastructure. And then thirdly, is about smart support. Being proactive when customers need to engage with Nutanix on support issues, then being able to automate those processes and being proactive about it. So this is how we're really going to focus on creating customer delight. It starts with the cluster at the top of that image. And from those clusters, if you have one or more clusters, you would require to enable the Pulse telemetry. Pulse is a technology, essentially it's a core home technology, and it gives us metrics about your environment. They're all anonymized, and that goes into the Insights service, where it's all analyzed to understand, what discoveries come out of it. What can we recommend to the customers to do within their environment that will allow them to increase their availability and performance and stability of their infrastructures. So these are the recommendations, and these recommendations are essentially a prioritized list allowing for easy remediation of the issues. It could be, for example, that we see a customer is running an infrastructure where the software is out of date. It could be that there are firmware recommendations out of date. It could be that we have seen a particular issue about to arise in your environment that needs some form of remediation. When it comes to smart support, if a case needs to be opened, what we do is we will automate that process of opening the support case. We will automate the collection of the relevant diagnostic data from your environment to help support that remediation. And we'll also assign an SRE. And this is all being done transparently in the background from either ourselves or from the customer's perspective. This allows the customer to really streamline their support processes because they don't need their own IT administrators to be focused on creating those cases, finding the right logs, uploading them to Nutanix. That can all be done automatically. And so these are the sort of things that we discover and do. Discoveries are really bridging the what is with your infrastructure to the what should be with your infrastructure. And what we're doing is we're taking that pulse telemetry and we're analyzing that alongside all of our field advisories, security bulletin information, knowledge bases, all of this wealth of information that we have collected within Nutanix and the support organization. We're analyzing your data alongside that to make these recommendations to customers. And then with the support automation, we're doing these one-click diagnostics, coming up with the automation of collecting and creating those cases for the customer. From an analytics perspective, we're able to look back historically and across customers and understand if customer A applied certain patches to fix a certain solution for a certain set of circumstances in their environment, but we see customer B has a very similar structure in their organization, it might be we make that same recommendation to them. So we start to be able to do a lot of analysis that allows this sort of comparison of how different customers are running their environments, the sort of performances they're getting and things like that. And this one product insights is cross-geo and sites, clusters. It's baked into sort of Prism centrals. Is all done, managed through our support portal. So at this point, I'll just touch on a couple of customers. So I said that this is essentially coming out. This is a new capability that we're offering to our customers. It's some technology that's been within Nutanix for many years for our support organizations. But for the last, since January, for the last few months, we've been running an early access program with some of our customers. And these are some of the quotes that we're getting back from them. How it's saving them time, which is a critical resource for bottom line technologies. How it's built with the customer in mind from Rakuten European Bank. Opening support cases is much faster for the Victorlik company, which is in manufacturing. All right, at this point now we're going to go into Lifecycle Manager. So this is really about keeping software up to date. So how do we ensure that customers can really effectively keep the software up to date in their environment while they're doing this remotely, which in obviously today's working environment is very important. And it's really about the need for simplicity. So how do organizations understand and what awareness do they have of vulnerabilities that they might have in their environment due to old versions of software and firmware? What are the complex dependencies that they have when planning upgrades? Can I just install a version of software, but what if there are dependencies on particular versions of the firmware that are below it or other software dependencies? We also acknowledge that for some of our larger customers, they may run multiple different hardware vendors within their infrastructure. And for each hardware vendor, typically there's a different approach to how they upgrade firmware. Now, how can we get past that? How can we provide customers with a very consistent approach to upgrading their platform's firmware? Software products will often have their own UI and upgrade process as well. So it creates for a very inconsistent experience and also specialist expertise being required in these different software products. How can we mitigate around the impact to service outages for end users? When we do upgrades, we've spoken in the past about sort of upgrade Tuesdays and how we can mitigate against those. What can we do to eliminate or at least minimize the outages that customers may be facing and enable customers to do upgrades during normal office hours, essentially? and with that, reduce the overall cost of upgrades for planning and potentially even the outsourcing of doing the upgrades themselves. So Lifecycle Manager, or LCM, is that technology that's all about non-disruptive remote upgrades. It's easy to use because we have a centralized interface, a control plane that manages this. It removes the complexity by understanding all the different intricacies and the packages that can be updated from software through to the firmware. It also enables us to unify the upgrade process. So if you're running, whether it's a Nutanix node or you're running Nutanix technologies on one of the other supported hardware vendors from HPE to Lenovo to Fujitsu, what you get is a very consistent upgrade process through LCM for making sure that those platforms and the firmwares are all up to date. The way we achieve this is through our sort of one-click architecture. The whole architecture that even Steve spoke about earlier really lends itself very well to the LCM product. It's built without any underlying dependencies on either AOS or Prism Central. But it's developed in line within Nutanix with other software products. So essentially that the other products have to build in the upgrade capability into LCM as they move forward, which ensures that we have this one framework for upgrading your infrastructure. It's a module-based architecture at that, and that allows third-party vendors to use our SDK to also integrate much more quickly into that environment. So they're not waiting for us to release a particular version before they can upgrade. They're able to develop their integration in alignment with us. And essentially what this creates is a lifecycle manager product, an upgrading product that is our single source of truth for Nutanix software and all of the system upgrades within the environment. So don't just take my word for it. What if upgrades were really that simple? Well, these are a number of tweets that have been made over the years from our customers about upgrading Nutanix technologies. There's one very recent one here that is about upgrading 13 nodes very, very simply. Including that's on AHV, our hypervisor, but including BIOS and BMC, HBAs, etc. The ones that really interest me and the ones I want to touch on is the one here in the middle from Matt Day about upgrading his infrastructure in under 30 minutes from 9,000 miles away and whilst at 38,000 feet up, assuming he's on in an airplane. Why is that interesting? Because what it says is not just that he can do this, it's that he has such confidence in the Nutanix upgrade process that he's willing to upgrade his infrastructure in that scenario. Another example here from Hugh about how he can do it while sipping some red wine. He can relax and upgrade his infrastructure without having to be there in front of the console at work doing this. He can relax knowing that he has the confidence in the process to complete as expected. So now at this point, we'll go over to Nikhil to do a quick demo, if we can, on LCM.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, great. Hey, thanks, Mark. For the intro. Essentially, what Nutanix has done is that it has taken the distributed systems, principles, and have not just applied it to the data path, like the storage and the hypervisor, but also applied that to the control plane. And one of the problems in the control plane, as Mark just explained, is upgrades, right? Upgrades of entities from one version to the other. And these entities are actually, anything. It could be a software from Nutanix, it could be a software from third party, or it could be firmware, right? From Nutanix NX systems, or third party firmware from Dell, HPE, Lenovo, right? And because of the complexities of these individual entities and their nuances, upgrading them as anybody who has managed a data center knows, is quite complicated, right? Um, so we went back in the engineering team back to the roots and looked at Yum. So Yum is a tool for upgrading Linux packages, right? And it's a very simple package which says Yum install or a Yum upgrade, and it goes and upgrades all the dependencies with one single command. And what led to LCM around 4.5 years back was this whole principle that can we bring Yum into a distributed system like Nutanix. So what I have here is a recording of my demo where I have two clusters. On the left is a Prism Central. On the right tab is a Prism Element. Prism Central is our control plane that runs a bunch of services like objects service, MSP, which is our microservices platform, the Prism Central itself, and it manages multiple clusters. And on the right is a Prism Element, which is our AOS cluster, and it consists of AOS entities like the hypervisor, the firmware, and the AOS software, right? So why don't I click my demo and show how LCM works. So this is the Prism Central, where you can go to the administration page and click on LCM, and you see this interface, right? And this is an easy to see, easy to use interface. It doesn't have any inventory right now. Same on the Prism Element. You can go to LCM and see that there's no inventory. So let's now start our discovery and start discovering the inventory, right, on both the clusters. So we'll do it on the PE. You see all the tasks created, and then we shift on the PC and do the same thing, right? Once you click, after a few minutes, you would see the tasks getting created and making progress. And soon we will see inventory of what is running, what are the current versions of entities running on the Prism Central and the Prism Element. So as you can see, this is the Prism Element and this is the Prism Central, and we have a bunch of software entities, right? So now what are those software entities, right? So let's go to Prism Central again and see what those software entities are. So you can see there is AOS, because Prism Central is managing AOS, right? There is microservices platform, that is a Kubernetes-based platform. There is NCC, which is our homegrown insights. There's object service, which is our object store, right? So as you can see, there are varied types of entities, from Kubernetes clusters to services, all of them are shown in a unified view, in this software tab. So you can see the available versions and the current versions. Now with one single click, you can actually click on software and update all, or you can select independent entities. Now the good news is, just like Yum selects all the dependencies, if you go and select Objects Manager, its dependency, which is MSP, gets selected. Go and click an object service, its dependencies, which are Objects Manager and MSP, get auto-selected. So the customer sitting in their remote office can actually, with one single click, click, and all of the updates, which are required to be done are selected, and we can update them. So we'll not click the update button here because it'll take a little bit time. But the same constructs also apply to Prism Element, right? So you can go to Prism Element, you can go to the LCM screen, and there you will see all of our current versions. So you'll see not only the cluster-wide software which has been installed, right, like Foundation, like the hypervisor, right, or AOS, NCC, but also the firmware versions. So you'll see, what BIOS, BMC, HBAs, firmware are present, and more details about the inventory, how many of those entities are present, how many SATA drives are present, how many NICs are present, so on and so forth, right? So, and you can do that in one single location, for your entire cluster, right? This is the inventory. Now you can also see that there are software updates and firmware updates. So in software updates, you can select, all software, Or you can go and select a particular version of software. So you can select all software and you'll see the hypervisor, the AOS, the foundation, all of them will get updated with this single click, and 7 updates will get applied with the dependencies resolved. So the end user doesn't have to worry about the critical dependencies that exist between these entities. Or you can select a particular entity, which is AOS. You can select the version, look at the release notes, figure out what is available on this particular version, and then choose to go ahead with your upgrades or not. Now, the cool thing is the same thing also, the exact same workflow also applies for all firmware. So you can select all firmware and with a single click update all of the firmware across all the nodes in your cluster. You can select and you can preview what will get updated to what version. And once you are happy with your selection, when you click on the apply 11 updates, all these updates will get applied. Or you can select a particular host and do the same thing, and that host's firmware will get updated. And you can do it host by host if your maintenance window is not large enough. So you can do it, one day one host, the other day other hosts, right? So on and so forth. You can also select an individual entity, and here we selected BIOS, which has a dependency on BMC. So as you can see, the dependencies are auto-selected, right? So all of these permutations and combinations are possible, making the lives of the customers who are using LCM easy, and with a single click in a remote environment, they can do these updates without any disruption. Now, that's the important point, right? All of these updates happen invisibly to the customer, as in that the workloads keep running, and Nutanix underlying technologies works with the hypervisor manager, works with the storage manager to make sure that the workloads are highly available. So there is no disruption to the workloads which are running for the cluster, on the cluster for the customer. So essentially, it's one-click invisible updates for Nutanix environment. We'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil. And I think my experience when I used to do upgrades going back a few years, just even having that ability to ensure that you have a consistent version of software or a consistent version of your firmwares across your infrastructure is a huge win. Being able to do that and remotely and wherever they are in the world from a simple click is a huge advantage. So thank you for that demo. I'm glad that worked.
Thanks,
So
Mark.
Nutanix is a leader in hyperconverged infrastructure. So we're positioned very well on both the Gartner Magic Quadrants and the Forrester Wave documents as well. You can go to those respective analyst research firms, and they have papers on their Magic Quadrant and Wave HCIs as well. So please go there for further information. So we're at this point where I'd like to just do a quick recap. And this has all been about running your data centers from your anywhere. We focused on a subset of the overall technologies that you might be using, but really focused around how you can deploy infrastructure, that ability to deploy globally in an automated fashion your nodes using Foundation Central. AOS and Prism are two key technologies for the remote management of your infrastructure from anywhere, allowing you to do that day-to-day management of the infrastructure, ensuring that your infrastructure is up and running, that you're able to tolerate node failures and the like. And then you've got the supportability with real-time predictive health and automated remediation using the new product Insights that's going to be out very, very soon. From an LCM perspective, we just heard from Nikhil the zero-touch, non-disruptive, one-click upgrades that Lifecycle Manager brings. Again, enabling organizations to remotely upgrade their environment without being physically present where the nodes are themselves. I'd like to encourage everyone to check out Nutanix.com test drive. The test drive, it allows you to test aspects of our infrastructure in a live environment. It's all free to use. So do please go ahead and run nutanix.com/test drive at your opportunity to try the technologies out for yourselves. At that point, I think, David, we're into a Q&A portion.
That's right, Mark. Yeah, a really cool presentation. Love the live demo. Thank you for doing that, Nikhil. All right, let's see. First question that came in, they're asking is about LCM and Foundation Central. Are those two separate products? Or is LCM in Foundation Central? How does that work?
Yeah, they're two separate products. Basically, Foundation Central is used for the deployment of the technology, and then Lifecycle Manager LCM is used for the upgrade.
Got it. Okay. And is LCM just compatible with AOS, or is it compatible with other products?
Yeah, so LCM is compatible with all of Nutanix products like AOS, AHV hypervisor, files, objects. It's a single one-place stop for all upgrades at Nutanix. Mark, I don't know if you want to add something.
No, I think you've covered it there. It's as new technologies come out, as I mentioned during the slides, we're making sure that the software development processes within our own software development teams is leveraging LCM, so that it is that one way of upgrading Nutanix infrastructure, but also the firmwares of the relevant platforms and potentially other software products as well. So it's giving organizations that very consistent way of upgrading their infrastructures.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. There's another question.
I saw there was a question here, David, if I may, I want to answer from Mr. Fenton about are the scaling features specific to Nutanix hardware? Is it possible to start enhancing older third-party nodes with Nutanix nodes? So this question came in during the earlier portion of the webinar. With Nutanix technologies, there are typically organizations will go out and buy new technologies, whether they're Nutanix nodes or nodes that are certified from one of our third-party OEMs or third-party providers. There's a difference between nodes from OEMs and the Nutanix nodes that typically ship from factory with technology, the AOS already baked in, whereas you can also buy third-party nodes from your own vendor, and then purchase the software separately and combine the two. There is a hardware compatibility list that we host on the Nutanix site that ensures all the hardware that you're looking to purchase is supported by Nutanix software. So that's something that I would say you would need to check out with any other hardware you're looking to use for Nutanix deployments.
Excellent. There's another question here from Sandra about during the demo, it said something about not secure.
I'm not sure, was it the presentation itself or the LCM workflow? But essentially, the LCM workflow itself is completely secure because we sign these packages with the Nutanix private keys. And then when we after we download these packages, LCM downloads these packages, it validates that the signature is correct via the public key, which is stored on the Nutanix cluster. So, all of our upgrade procedures are quite secure.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for Q&A, unfortunately, today. We got lots of good questions coming in. I really appreciate everyone's comments and questions. I also appreciate our expert presenters, Nikhil, Mark, and Steve. Thank you for being on the event today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Of course, thank you to our audience for joining the event. Before we go, I want to award the Tango gift card, the $300 Tango gift card that's going to Brian Olberding from Kansas. Brian Olberding from Kansas will reach out to you to deliver that prize. I want to remind everyone to visit Nutanix.com/test drive for more information and to try the Nutanix solution for yourself. That link is also available there in the handouts tab. It says test drive hyperconverged infrastructure. Thank you everyone for joining today's event, and thank you to Nutanix for your support. I hope you learned a lot and had a good time. I know I did. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.